I am here with Andrea Robb from Autodesk now. Before we get started, just for those that may not know you, a little bit about your background and kind of what's gotten you to this place in your career and what you're doing today.
Yeah, so I am currently at Autodesk. I'm only a month in, as we were talking about earlier. I just recently came from AirBnB, where I was head of talent design and operations. In that space, we were very focused on belonging, so not only as a company, but inside as well. So I spent a lot of time researching and thinking about belonging at Airbnb. Prior to that, I had my own practice. Prior to that, I was at Lucasfilm for 10 years running their OD and learning team. So for me, making work better and making it more enjoyable is really what I do.
All right, well, let's start honing in a little bit on the topic today, which is performance and talking about performance. And I think in the beginning, I know you've had a lot of experience with this. Let's start historically.
I think it's fair to say that performance management over the last several decades has come out of a place where organizations were thought of more as machines than as living organisms. So the military actually is sort of the testing ground for a lot of organizational effectiveness practices, even now today. So what we fell into is the idea of very predictable timeframes quarterly. We're going to look at our goals, and then we're going to review our people against those goals. And we want to make sure that we're paying people fairly. I'd say 2000s, people started to really start to feel uncomfortable with the process. It felt very formal. It didn't really match the dynamic way people wanted to grow and move within the organization. So I think there was a call from within the organization, is there something else we can be doing? And then what ultimately happened, we just threw out the performance management process altogether. And you see a lot of very big companies say, we've gone to a check-in process because we want to be more developmental. Yeah. That's a bad idea, because employees still deserve evaluative feedback in addition to developmental feedback. Mm-hmm. They need to know how they're doing, because that is talked about in closed door sessions: talent review, succession planning, and pay. So if that goes underground, then transparency that's expected with the new generation goes with it. What really is starting to drive, I think, a more forward-looking performance management process, and I think that word is challenging because no people like to be managed in today's world, but the performance sort of enablement platform, which includes development and evaluative, have to come together and be criteria based. And what I mean by that is really clear expectations for everyone, so that men, women, and people of color all are being held to the same expectation and unconscious bias doesn't creep in. Women tend to get more ambiguous feedback, so even if it's positive or negative, it's very abstract and ambiguous, so less helpful. Over 80% of women's feedback is personality-based. And lastly, the words we use matter. So getting results, driving, even though women too can drive and get results, we tend to use that language with men, and we use communal language with women. And that does not serve us well when we're thinking about them in a performance setting.
So we've identified some of the areas and the challenges. What are some things that you'd like that you're using now or you'd like to see in a more healthy performance development?
Try to take out as much open-ended text in the review, because that's the space we tend to get in trouble. Lots of paragraphs written about a female leader can actually hurt her versus help her. Get really clear on what you expect of people from a culture standpoint, core values, and what you expect of them from a result standpoint. Is it driving individual results or team results? And really put a quantified measure on that. So 1 through 5 rating. I'm big in favor of more ratings and more data. There's this big debate about, should there be a final rating? I think it's the wrong debate. We need more quantified data and more nuanced data that can actually inform development, talent reviews, and pay. I think the unconscious bias training movement in D&I is important, but it has to be just in time. So at Airbnb, we developed an animated video with all of the research and the tips around unconscious bias right at the moment we were going into a talent review or a calibration. And that is when we could all be reminded of
so not just
things.
One time forgotten, but really as you were going into these high bias areas.
That's right. Just-in-time training with the practices is sort of the current best practice around fair process. I still think there is room for check-ins and helping managers understand, how do you open up a conversation with people about their career and day-to-day feedback, but that it doesn't have to be a big deal, that can be employee-driven, and the manager is always good to be a coach along the way. A friend and mentor of mine said, the problem with feedback is we're sloppy at how we ask for it. So how many times have you been asked, hey, I'd love some feedback? That's it. So in that moment, even if I'm looking to get feedback from my boss or from a peer, I know it's on me to think about Craig and all of my interactions with you and all of the things you may or may not be expected to do. Yeah. And there's just too much onus on me. So as an individual, you should be really clear about what type of feedback are you looking for, who are you going to get it from. Same goes with career, thinking about what am I good at and what am I not good at, and taking the lead around that so your manager does not have to lead you along the path of who you are and what you need to develop around. So meet your manager halfway.
Yeah. Any tips, we've talked broad, but any tips you'd say to a manager that's getting ready to use whatever process is in place?
Yeah, I think it's important early to think about with your people, what set of people are going to give us the best view into your performance. So I know that Zugata, which is one platform that I've looked at, and one aspect I really admire is the technology actually can tell you who are you interacting with. It really could tell you who am I meeting with, who am I emailing with, who am I slacking with. And I think as a manager, you really need to be paying attention at that moment to make sure that you're getting a full picture. You really have such a limited view as a manager. So thinking about that in advance and not just waiting until it's the night before a review and you've got to try to contextualize all the feedback.
Well, Andrea, thank you so much. You are tried and true. You're a people geek. You're one of
Totally.
us in this community.
I love it.
Just amazing work. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.